the national officials have come to a decision to redeploy Commander Floyd Shivambu as the Secretary General of the party and redeploying him to the National Assembly.
It's the umpteenth switch-up in the Umkhonto we Sizwe party's leadership structure in the past year or so. But Floyd Shivambu's push from the official opposition Secretary-General to Member of Parliament should not surprise you. The real reasons, though, behind the political demotion might.
Floyd's visit to Malawi was, I would say, an excuse that they could find to take action against him. And secondly, this is a party that has embraced a whole range of people that have been accused with a whole range of serious discrepancies. When you have people implicated in state capture, when you have a judge who was impeached, it's happy, with keeping the company of those people. So why would a visit to Malawi that is not sanctioned be such a big issue to see someone removed? No, we don't buy that story at all.
Catch the full discussion with News 24 political editor Andisiwe Makinana next. Later in the show, the Deputy President goes big in Japan on the taxpayer's ticket. And finally, claims of imminent June power cuts are all hogwash, says our disinformation desk.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
You can mail us, thelead@24.com, or from today, you can now send a short voice note of around 15 to 20 seconds with your questions, thoughts on the latest episode to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That's on 072 562 3179. 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. Well, he took off his red beret to take up the spear, but the writing's been on the wall for some time now before we saw the Umkhonto we Sizwe party yesterday boot Floyd Shivambu out of his Secretary-General office and onto the benches in Parliament. Still, it's just one of many leadership changes inside former President Jacob Zuma's young MKP party since it shocked all in last year's elections. Whether you like it or not, the MKP is the official political opposition, and you and I ought to know more about its ability to govern itself and potentially parts of South Africa in future. Now, to discuss this further, we're joined in our Cape Town studios by political editor Andisiwe Makinana. Andy, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I know you guys are very, very busy with various political projects at the moment on the political desk. We could say, right, Andy, that a lot of the troubles that we've seen within the Umkhonto we Sizwe party, it all started with that initial standoff between the founder, Jabulani Khumalo, as well as Zuma. But it's seemingly only intensified since. And for the average newsie, yesterday's announcement of Floyd Shivambu's reshuffling in the party, it might have been as a surprise, but we've been expecting this for a while, right?
We have been expecting this for a while, Graham, you're correct. The MK party has been around for about 18 months, but it doesn't go for over, I would say, 6 weeks without making any changes. So this is a big one. The SG of a political party is basically the CEO of the political party, is the driver in the engine room of the political party. And with all the changes that we've seen, it is a demotion because I've seen people saying, no, being sent to parliament is not a demotion. Being sent to parliament is a big deal. MPs have got all these powers. But at the same time, removing an SG who is in charge of the operations of the organization on a daily basis to parliament is a big deal. So yes, it's been expected for a while, but still again, it's one of those big things that only Jacob Zuma will do.
So the party has taken the stance, Andy, that this controversial meeting between Floyd Shivambu as well as the controversial pastor, Shepherd Bushiri, in Malawi, that's the official line, that there's issue there because government came out. We saw the Justice Minister, Andy, come out and say, this shouldn't have happened in light of the fact that, our authorities still want to bring Bushiri to justice in this country. But there's more here than to what meets the eye. There's been a lot of political still sort of festering, happening in the background for a while now, right? And of course, notwithstanding that big standoff on social media with Zuma's daughter and Shivambu.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if anyone in the country actually believes the official reasons that were given yesterday for the demotion of Floyd Shivambu. We've known about his seeming departure for months before even he thought of going to visit Bushiri. If you remember in February when Duduzile Zuma, the former president's daughter, took to Twitter. This was in February already, about 2 months before Floyd went to see Bushiri in Malawi. Now, even back then, before that meltdown on Twitter, there were always rumors making rounds about some fallout between Duduzile, and she's got her father's ear, and she's somewhere high up there in the running of the party. So by the time that meltdown happened, we were already hearing that there was some sort of a fallout and that Floyd may have to leave his position. And the Floyd's visit to Malawi was, I would say, an excuse that they could find to take action against him. And secondly, I mean, this is a party that has embraced a whole range of people that have been accused with a whole range of serious discrepancies. When you have people implicated in state capture, when you have a judge who was impeached, it's happy, with having keeping the company of those people. So why would a visit to Malawi that is not sanctioned be such a big issue to see someone removed? No, we don't buy that story at all.
Absolutely, and our colleagues Siamtanda Tapa as well as Soyiso Maliti brought this story earlier this morning on the front page, still trending on News 24. Too aloof, too arrogant, according to sources. MKP prepares to name new Secretary General after Shivambu's reshuffle to parley. The insinuation is made here by the political desk's understanding through the various sources that are not being named within the MKP that at this stage, Shivambu was just quite bad at his job. That's the sort of idea that's been given, that administratively he wasn't doing what was necessary here.
That's the story that is partially possible, Graham, because when Duduzile took to Twitter in February to say Floyd is the worst thing that has ever happened to her father's party, at the time we were already hearing that there was unhappiness in the party over Floyd Shivambu, who came from the EFF. So there were accusations already at the time that he was not good at running the party. But one of the key things that were spoken of were, there's a phenomenon in the MK party that we also heard of in the EFF, which they call arrivalists phenomenon. So these are people that would join a party, and in a matter of weeks, months, they are promoted into senior positions. So if you remember, Floyd was not among the founders of the MK party. He only joined after the elections, and he was appointed a national organizer when he joined, and then I think 2 months later he was made the Secretary General. So there were accusations that with some senior EFF people leaving EFF to join the MKP, Floyd was now appointing these arrivalists, in inverted commas, to senior positions in the MK party. And we saw that in the form of Busisiwe Mkhwebane, who left the EFF and became some coordinator or convener in Mpumalanga. We also saw that through Zwanele Manyi, who also left the EFF in Parliament and became not just an MP in the MKP, but he also became its chief whip. So there were concerns among people that had been with the MKP since the beginning to say, how come do we have this arrivalist getting this senior position, and now we watch him appoint other arrivalists? So this is one of the issues that people were apparently unhappy about.
Andy, one of the quotes for one of the sources for this particular story writes, and I'll quote it verbatim, when Floyd came back from Malawi, now with the Shepherd Bushiri visit, which was controversial and it was public, the first thing he did was take a trip to Nkandla to explain himself to Ubaba Zuma, and Ubaba showed him flames. You know how he is. I mean, Floyd is the SG. He made a mess and he wanted to explain, but Zuma didn't even see him. Floyd spent an entire day waiting for him. It's very illustrative. Do you buy that sort of sentiment?
I actually laughed when I saw that line when I read the story, because it resonated with something that that came out recent days. One of President Zuma's very tight buddies, very loyal fans, is one Kalni House.
Yes, of course.
Who remains in the EFF. So Kalni House, just over the last week, took to Twitter, to talk about how he went to Nkandla to advise Jacob Zuma against forming Umkhonto weSizwe. And Zuma was angry with him because he wasn't joining his party. And Kalni House tweeted about how Zuma locked the gates and wouldn't allow him into his homestead in Nkandla.
Sure.
I mean, we know how close these two gentlemen have been over years, and how Carl has supported Zuma over his many cases. But,
thick and thin.
Yeah, exactly. So when Carl saw that, tweeted that last week, and I saw this last night, I was like, this looks familiar. This is maybe Zuma's new strategy to avoid these people that go to his home, because we also know that apparently people just show up there to try to get favors, to try to get his support, to try and lobby him or whatever.
Sure.
Yes, this has been an issue even from back when he was the president of the republic.
I mean, it's no surprises given that we all know exactly where Nkandla is, right? And we also know where the location is of that very infamous fire pool. The MKP's also been going through parliamentary chief whips like it's no one's business. We've already alluded to this. Colleen Makubele, she's now replaced Mzwanele Manyi. Also a bit of a surprise in its own right. What do we know about Colleen? She's a former City of Johannesburg speaker. And from what I've read from her engagement thus far with the media, she's sort of indicated that the MKP needs to start forwarding its real policies. It needs to now basically explain to the voter, this is what we look like as an alternative viable party that could potentially be in government, and not necessarily a party that's always dealing with all this internal nonsense, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, Colleen is a newcomer to Parliament itself. I don't think she's been there for even 3 months. For her to now have to lead not just any caucus, the official opposition. And it's quite a big caucus, the MK party. It's 58 MPs. Now, she comes at the back of Mzwanele Manyi's removal. There was also another gentleman there who was a chief whip before Mzwanele Manyi. So she's the third chief whip.
It's third in a year.
It's a third in less than a year. That is correct. And that is something that is quite unusual. And for me, it's a party that up to now has not managed to take up that role of the official opposition, because it's also filling the very big shoes that were left by a Democratic Alliance, which was the opposition for 30 years before it joined the government of national, or became part of the government of national unity. So they still have to establish themselves as a party in Parliament. They're a new party in Parliament. They still do not understand Parliament processes. People think Parliament is about getting up and shouting point of order, but there is a whole lot more that you have to understand about Parliament to be able to. You must understand the processes, you must understand the rules, and there's a lot of research. You don't just get up, you must be very informed for you to be able to hold the government departments, the other entities of the state and so on to account. So the MKP has a long way to go in just understanding the basics in Parliament. So all these changes are not good for that caucus. You need stability. You need a leader that can guide those 58 MPs. And so far, I don't think they've been able to give themselves that space to even learn those basics. And if I may add, with Floyd Shivambu coming to Parliament, for me, as someone who has been covering Parliament for a long time, Floyd Shivambu has 10 years experience as a chief whip when he was in the
He knows the
EFF.
ropes.
He knows the ropes. He is a whole lot of things, but the one thing you cannot deny, he's a very smart person. So the EFF, when they came to Parliament in 2014, they knew what to do. They were very quick to learn the rules. They made it their project. They would spend days on end in the parliamentary library going through a whole lot of information. So I see it as a gain for Parliament, his move to Parliament. But then again, I don't know if he would be willing, with all the experience that he has, and with, I don't know if I would call it a baggage of being demoted, if he would be willing to work under a chief whip that has no experience of being a chief whip, has no experience of being an MP, because this new chief whip of theirs has been in Parliament. I think it's been 2 months. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic to watch. And going back to your question about them establishing their policies and all those things, I don't know if they could be able to do it now. I think they have the very basic issues to focus on.
You've observed how MPs, for example, for the MKP benches didn't even show up during sometimes the budget process, how they could have swung potentially the vote against the ANC's sort of finance ministry proposals, for example. So they could have swung it in the past, but some of them have been absent from certain committees. They've not been able to refill certain positions within Parliament. So we haven't actually really even seen the MKP at its strongest legislatively.
Yeah, look, what happened, especially with the vacancies, because the party, it again speaks to the whole issue of lacking experience of Parliament. So there are rules, there are laws, these things are not just done willy-nilly. So parties in Parliament, it's a very long process of electing an MP. And with the changes that the MKP has been making to its benches in Parliament, because if you remember, even their parliamentary leader, Dr. Floyd, was not part of the list that was gazetted before the elections. A whole lot of their MPs that are in Parliament today were not part of the process that is overseen by the IEC before we go to elections, or before we went to the elections in the case of last year. So they only brought these people after the elections. When you do that, at some point you are going to deplete the list that was gazetted. And the election of MPs, you don't just pick anyone from the street. You must. It's a process that is guided and processed by the IEC. So once you deplete the list, you must wait for at least a year from the day of the election before you can bring on new people. So when the budget process happened, the MKP had depleted the list with all the changes that it was making, and they had to wait now for that year period before they could replenish. So now with the year being over, because last week the year since the last election ended. So now they can, I think that's how Floyd will be able to be brought to Parliament, because now they can make the changes, they can bring in new people. But at the time the budget happened, it was them still observing that 1 year period, having depleted the list that they had submitted to the IEC.
And all of us as journalists, we're waiting for that moment when the MKP could potentially be in government in KwaZulu-Natal, arguably their stronghold. But we've seen Zuma himself come out. He's basically, chastised his own KwaZulu-Natal members of the provincial legislature there, saying, why are you holding talks with the ANC? I'm not going to allow that. We're not going to go into any sort of coalition with the ANC. MKP's also sort of been trying to boost itself, joining forces with the ATM party. I mean, that's no real surprises. And they've even won a by-election in Saldanha Bay here in the Western Cape. I never thought that would happen, potentially even in the Western Cape. But look, they took it off the ANC.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Saldanha Bay by-election was a surprise. No one has been able to actually explain what happened there, besides people saying it was the ANC that messed up its own election of its own candidates. So with the ANC fighting over its own candidates, that opened the door for the second party to win. Otherwise, the party is quite strong and entrenched in KZN. And yes, there is a likelihood that they could win KZN. And it's going to be interesting now to watch with the removal of Floyd Shivambu, because another element in the build-up to his removal, there's a faction, if I may call it that, of traditional leaders that
Not
are
arrivalists. This
not
is
a rivalist of traditional leaders, because even if you go back to December 2023, when President Zuma announced his party, he did say that he's consulted all these people, but he emphasized the role that traditional leaders, that he believes traditional leaders should be playing, not just in his political party's politics, but in South Africa in general.
And one of them could be Phumlani Mfeka,
and one
which
of
is
them could be the next Secretary General of the MK party.
looking at the press conference, seeing Floyd being brought out. This is somebody who has commanded the top leadership of the EFF. He's now had a very senior position within the MKP, but he was seemingly made to be sort of humbled before the media's cameras here. Do you think that was the intention of the press conference?
We were very surprised to see him, first of all, attending the press conference, and he was not seated among the leadership. He was sitting with the other attendees. And then later, he took a moment to speak to and address journalists to say he accepts the decision of the party and he accepts the redeployment to parliament. And I found that very uncharacteristic of Floyd Shivambu, because as the sources have said, very aloof, very arrogant. That was very un-Floyd of us to see yesterday. But I believe it's because of the soft landing that the party has offered him, which is this job in parliament. MPs earn way over $1 million a year. So I think they didn't just boot him out of the position and he became one of the, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of members. At least they still gave him something. And I think that's why he felt compelled to play along, show up, be humble, appear to be humble. But I truly don't believe he will be spending that much time in parliament, considering the experience that he has. And I feel he also would feel wasted in parliament in a party that doesn't seem to have any direction. I think if he was sent to parliament to be its chief whip, to be its leader, to whip others into line, I would understand it. But the party appointed a new chief whip only last week, which means Floyd is unlikely to become the chief whip. And I really don't see him taking instructions from people that are still learning the ropes in parliament. But I say, let's watch the space.
Well, at least for now, right? Who knows? Colleen could be out of a job in a couple of months and then we'll be talking about this in a different light again. Of course, people who just watch this from afar, they might be excused for conflating the MKP with the EFF. But at the end of the day, the MKP it's a conservative traditionalist sort of party in its own right, because its policies do speak to a lot of that, right? We've spoken at length about some of its mandates in the past, and we have yet to really see that in practice, right? Some of it's controversial.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to understand what exactly South Africa would look like under the MKP party. Like, if you look at the statement they issued the day before yesterday, when the Western Cape High Court ruled that Judge Hlophe cannot serve in the JSC, they released a statement where they slammed the 3 unelected judges making a decision or overturning a decision of parliament of elected people. So in their book, we would be having a parliament democracy where the constitution would not, exist, well, at least in its current form, where the judiciary and the courts would be secondary and the constitution, and would have a parliament majority and how things would be decided. So it's very concerning the way the MK party views this constitution and views this democracy. Where they benefit, they love it, they take, but in the main, they always question a whole lot of basic concepts that are provided for all of us in the Bill of Rights and which we all benefit, including President Zuma from. So it's worrying that they may become a majority, and possibly if they were to have that 75%, I think, to change the constitution, they would do that.
Of course, social media, politically, it's been used with all sort of messaging going out. Some of it from, obviously, the MKP, from Zuma's daughter, has been sort of conflatory messages. Do you think it's a big Zuma strategy here? Do you think there's something more at play? What's your take, finally, just to end off?
Yeah, no, I know that people believe that politicians always put out feelers to see how people would react to whatever decision they may be planning to take. But really, in this case, I do not know. I do not think the former president would be playing those games. But then again, it's very difficult to just ignore, because as we saw last week, there were letters that were doing rounds about Floyd Shivambu being removed from his position. So you wonder, how do those people know if it's not people that are close to the former president? Because, in a matter of days, whatever was in that letter has since become true. So it's something to watch, but I really can't say he is involved. But then again, the question remains, who knew about it? Because someone close to the leadership must have known this was coming.
And of course, it's not the first time we've heard about accusations of factionalism within the MKP. That word has done the rounds in the lexicon of the different sort of political leadership engaging with one another. Andisiwe Makinana, our political editor here at News 24, thank you so much for your keen analysis here, delving deep into what we understand within the MKP party. Of course, to be a fly on the wall in Nkandla would be a fantastic job indeed. It would give us so much to talk about in our future editions of The Lead. Good luck with all your other political projects on at the moment.
Thank you so much for inviting us to your show.
To our training topic now, and what would you do with 2.3 million rand? Buy yourself a modest townhouse, invest and live off the profits? Well, for our Deputy President Paul Mashatile and his partner Humile, this is how much their recent trip to Japan cost you and me. Of this amount, 900,000 rand alone paid for the pair's accommodation in March. Around 5 million rand is what the taxpayer dished out for Mashatile to jet over to Ireland and the UK last year. Living the high life is par for the course for Mashatile, detailed by News 24 in a series of investigations. Now, Action SA has been pushing for foreign trip spending accountability in Parliament, with Mashatile indicating via written response that the Japan trip was justified to keep strong relations with South Africa's fourth biggest trading partner. Recent deputy presidential trips over the border to Zimbabwe and Botswana cost more than $50,000 each. And the total tally for Mashatile's recent stop in France has yet to be revealed. Still, to Japan, the deputy president and his wife opted for around 117,000 rand flights, whilst others in the official delegation only cost around 20,000 rand each. This reporting is thanks to political journalist and parliamentary correspondent Jan Gerber.
Are you burnt out from the week that was, but need to stay in the news loop? Every Saturday morning at 6, we release The Weekender, a quirky, in-depth look at South Africa and its people. Chock full of exclusive interviews, food, wine, playlists, and opinions, The Weekender is the ultimate segue into Saturday, right here on News 24.
And finally, here's your daily reminder to not believe everything you read and choose News 24 to decipher fact from fiction. Our disinformation desk has firmly debunked a fake news article claiming that the country will experience quote-unquote 14 hours of daily load shedding this month. Similar articles from the same site, called Rise Up West Virginia, are part of a network of disinformation pages thought to be run out of India. The desk's editor, Andrew Thompson, has told us that at least 80% of the articles were created using AI tools. Eskom's also since firmly discounted the fake news. Scrutinizing them more closely, the articles are untrue, but shared as links on social media sites like WhatsApp, for example, they tend to proliferate quite quickly. Thompson finds that the fake news is being spread deliberately as part of coordinated campaigns to touch on hot-button issues here in Mzansi. Well, before you hit send, be sure to double-check with News 24's disinformation desk. From MKP party switch-ups to lavish trips abroad, you can't say South Africa's boring. Some general housekeeping. We appreciate all your commentary on the previous episode. Speaking of Rudolph Lakay, the matriculant out in Mitchell's Plain, who took it upon himself to raise money to attend his ball in October later this year by selling sweets and also helping out around the house because his mom could not help financially, even though she wanted to. That story's seen such an outpouring of support. We've received various mails on the Leeds official email account indicating how some anonymous donors would like to assist. Thank you so much, and please do keep them coming. In the meantime, you could also hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels. My name's Graham Robenheimer, and so long as there's political news, we'll have the lead.